we are seeing around the world kind of, you could say, a shift in consciousness. Now, we talked about that. You say, yeah, there are shifts in consciousness in the Netherlands. Some people would become critical of the COVID-19 situation, but then stay racist. So there's not that really deeper critical thinking where people really question you could almost say the imperial system that we are in. So people are falling for other forms of propaganda again, so as anti-cultural Marxism, anti-woke, while being critical in other aspects. So they're co-opted, you could say, in a way. My question is, the Netherlands just had I would think a very far-right government. What was it, under Dick Schoof and Geert Wilders? But now it's finally. Now you have a center, what is it, center right or center liberal? Let's say just a liberal government, the D66. And my question is now with regards to geopolitics. We see that Germany is hyper supportive, for example, of what Israel's doing. The UK. There's a lot of discussions about how Zionism took control over the UK and Germany, and how people are not allowed to protest. And how is that in the Netherlands? Is there any political movement against what is happening in Palestine? That's question number one. And number two, how is it with speech and freedom of speech and activism for Palestine? Is there anything noticeable in that sense? So one, political, two, on the streets, activism. And maybe I can start with you, Danny.
As you said, we had an extreme right-wing government last year. And now we have a guy called Rob Jette, who's actually also have an Indonesian descendant, so to say. So there is definitely, this is not a coincidence, I want to say. This is also very maybe interesting for later on, but I think there's a pattern. Rutte, Wilders, Baudet, Jette. This Rob Jette, our new prime minister, was a year ago. He was also part of a huge pro-Palestine protest in the Netherlands called the Red Line, where he was also making selfies like, oh, we are against the genocide and so on, and we have to recognize Palestine and so on. The guy is in power now. He said nothing about it. Nothing. They still continue to support Israel to the fullest. And there are some small movements, activists going, of course, on the street. As I said, young students in Amsterdam, in Rotterdam, in the big cities, so to say. In the Netherlands, we have demonstrations. But then the awkward thing is, for example, we have Femke Halsema, who is the mayor of Amsterdam, who said really, literally, she said, if you are participating in these kind of protests, you can expect violence from the police. She did not set this stuff when there is, so to say, this anti-refugee protest. So to answer your question, I don't see any change. I think the Netherlands just go on what England is doing, what the Germans are doing. They fully supported Israel, for sure. I don't see any change or any, let's say, also political. Yeah, we have one political party, Denk, is a party in parliament who talks about Palestine and who wants to have the recognition of the Palestinian genocide and so on. But they are heavily attacked when they speak up and so on, because the majority from let's say the right spectrum in our political chamber till what we call left, because those right wings who were in power last year accuse now the new sitting government as left wing.
So how about Danny? How about the socialists? Because I remember back in the day we had the SP, the Socialist Party, and they were virulently pro-Palestine in the old days. That was really in the days of, what was his name again? That iconic figure. What was his name?
Marijnissen?
Marijnissen, the days of Marijnissen, indeed. But that's long ago. But how is that with the SP today? Are they not Socialist Party? Are they not pro-Palestine?
I
They
find
were
it hard to
very
say.
hesitant to, for example, support Maduro.
Yeah,
They accuse him and they find it okay that he's being taken to jails.
yeah, getting hijacked. So, and I
Okay,
must say, you can forget it. I mean, those days are gone. The Jan Marijnissen days are gone.
I think
I
there's
mean,
yeah.
actually a WikiLeaks cable that proves that they got a visit from the U.S. ambassador or something, that he was yeah. That was maybe in the time when they were a little bit more critical also of US policy and US wars, and then they were visited and reprimanded. And then some of the Gable says that, and eventually they changed their course, thankfully. So, yeah, I think, yeah.
So they were. You could say they were. How can you say that? De-radicalized the Socialist Party by the visit of the United States. Yeah, the Netherlands is another satellite state of the United States, of course. And when you say Rutte, for those of in the audience who don't know, but Rutte is what you guys say Rutte. Rutte is, of course, the NATO head of NATO, and he was our former prime minister. He's now the head of NATO, one of the most pathetic and embarrassing figures you'll ever see. And he was the one who called Donald Trump daddy. You have to listen to daddy. And but it's not surprising that he is running NATO, of course, because the first
And yeah.
major global empire were the Dutch. That's what people often forget. So this is a very fitting role. Marjolein, you want to say something?
Yeah, about the current role of the Netherlands, I think that's also something we have to pay attention to. I also wrote for Media Mondo last year, I wrote an article, The Netherlands Colonizes the Antilles, dus the Caribbean islands, for Venezuelan oil. And what my plan is to focus more, to highlight more on what the Netherlands, how they are still very active geopolitically in, you know, not, of course, also helping the United States, facilitating, and also with, military bases on the Caribbean islands, and I think intelligence services, and also diplomatic. For a long time there was no U.S. ambassador to the Venezuela, but there was a Dutch embassy in Caracas, which helped to hide Gonzalez, the
opposition.
U.S. puppet who replaced what's her name, Corina Machado. And I think they have these services, but also out of self-interest. And that's, I think, we have to take into account whether the government is openly right-wing under Prime Minister Schoof and with Wilders, or the more liberal version of Rob Jetten. Just days ago, Rob Jetten was visiting the Caribbean islands, the Antilles, and I think it's not a coincidence. They play a role. They play a very big role, and we have to keep that keep track on that, I think.
I want to
That's
emphasize one
why I
point.
always have one quick comment,
Yeah,
Danny, and I'll hand it to you. That's why I always have a problem. I also said that to my comrade Kit Clarenberg. He's a British journalist, and some of our other guests, for example, Dimitri Laskaris. I often say, I said, it's to me, it's problematic to say Anglo-American imperialism. It is not Anglo-American at least then say NATO imperialism, which I find a bit more fitting, because the Dutch are heavily involved in US imperialism, and the Germans as well, and the Danish as well, and the Belgians as well. And I'm like, I understand people do that because we still speak in the English language, and the last two major empires were English Anglophone empires, you could say, and the one before was the Dutch Empire, the global major empire. So in other words, people often make it simplify themselves and focus on the Anglo world. But I'm very happy, Marjolein, that you with Media Mondo that you focus on the Dutch still have heavy influence on global imperialism. When you say the Dutch Antilles. So the Dutch Antilles are of course formerly colonized, still partly colonized, by the way, by the Dutch in countries in South America, and and these were very, very enriching colonies of the Dutch, and what the Dutch are still doing there right now is very interesting. So I definitely think we should have a chat about that also someday. Yes, Marjolein?
And also, what annoys me often in this discussion on geopolitics, that people then say that we in Europe are colonized by the United States. So I think this is turning twisting the problem, because I think that if we don't see the United States as a European colony that still exists, and yeah, of course it is sort of became an independent entity after what they call the Independence War, but it is a colony with Europeans, with white people coming from Europe. So no, I don't think that we in Europe are colonized, or that we are, what do they call, that we are sort of only, subordinate and have to listen to in this case now Trump or other presidents. No, I think that United States also needs Europe. There is, and Europe. Because the United States played in the last 50 to 100 years a bigger role than what the British and the Dutch did before. Yes, they need each other, but also out of self-interest, many big multinationals are also Dutch and French and German and British. So it's not, they play this game together, and if we are talking about an empire, and when the empire falls, they will have to fall together. Otherwise, there is nothing really changed.
Well, that reminds me of what our comrade Benji and Indy always say of the Resistance is Fertile podcast. They always say they don't say the West, or they don't say the US. They say white empire, and I think there's something to be said for the white empire. But you wanted to say something, Danny?
Yeah, to come back to the role of the Netherlands, we talked about Rutte as the Secretary General of NATO, but we have a huge history when it comes to these positions. Joseph Luns, who was the foreign minister back in the days when, for example, when after the independence war in Indonesia, this guy started in 1933 as a member of the NSB together with his brother. So the NSB is,
for those who don't know, can you say what is the NSB?
The NSB is, I call it the daughter corporation of the Nazis, so to say. They fully collaborated with the Nazis in the Second World War, and Joseph Luns was a member of this party. You know where this guy ended his career? As Secretary General of NATO. Afterwards, Jaap de Hoofd Scheffer came as a Secretary General, also a Dutch guy. So it is no coincidence of, let's say, the position of the Dutch in geopolitics. They play a major role for sure. And I think history is also very important to see this pattern. As I said, Wilders has colonial background, Indonesia, Jette, Rutte, Baudet, and so on. So we should also, in some sense, focus on these kind of patterns, because it is a system. And I think it's very important to always look back in history how they get there in these positions and why they are on these positions. I think it's
So
very
why is that? Would you think, Danny? So Danny, you're highlighting a very interesting fact, and that is that all these very influential Dutch politicians, often highly imperial, often very racist, even, are of Indonesian descent or mixed heritage with Indonesian blood, you could say, and why is that? Like, what's going on here? Does that relate back to that colonial mentality that I talked about?
Absolutely, I think so, because I think the system needs always brown and black people who can enforce the white system. So I think it goes so far as I just said it. Like, I think they need people who encounter this white system, and I think they are. It is not a coincidence that they are on these positions, because many of what we talked in the first round, that we had this thing about Indonesia and diaspora people in the Netherlands who actually are seen in the Netherlands as victims, but they were perpetrators with with the Dutch. So I think in something in that role is very important to have people in power who still have this connection, and to keep also people on board, because as you said, Hayshi Ali, who made this film with Geert Wilders, I mean, also leftists love this progressive black and brown females, had to portray them as progressive, but within Western conditions and terms, so to say. So this is a very smart game that they are playing, and I
Yeah,
think
so
Yeah.
Ayaan Hirsi Ali, for those who don't know in the audience, who made that movie with Geert Wilders, is of course she's of what's her
Somalian. I
ethnicity?
think she's Somalian heritage, or she's Somalian.
Somalian heritage. Yeah, so a black Somalian woman, very intelligent, attractive woman. She was, of course, boosted in the Dutch politics to some of the highest roles, very visible, and who are, of course, the most visible people of color in the Netherlands. She absolutely detested Islam and Muslims. Of course, she would not say that she hates all Muslims. Of course, she was very wise. But the things that she said and generalized about Islam and Muslim people was, of course, extremely damaging to the society and to the, you could say, the cohesion of Dutch society. I think she has. Yeah, those days I remember it. I was quite young, and it was such a harrowing and dark experience those days. The Ayaan Hirsi Ali, Geert Wilders, George Bush. It was so dark those days. It was all so racist and anti-Islam. It was such a horrible atmosphere in the Netherlands, and yeah, I don't
She
know.
also made a mark in the
still
US.
feel it. Was that Peter?
She also made a mark in the U.S. I remember seeing her do the circuit, do the rounds of like the right wing media. Also, the Bill Maher show she was on. Yeah,
You know why she left? You know why she left, Peter? And this is almost. I should not say this. In Dutch, we have a word. It's called leedvermaak, and in Germany they say Schadenfreude.
Yeah.
And I should not do this because I'm above that. But what happened is she was part of a very powerful right-wing party that was very unapologetic in their stance against immigrants, and said no, and if you are here illegal, you're out, and if you lie even one word when you come into this country, you're out. And she supported that, of course, Ayaan Hirsi Ali. And then some very smart investigators found out that she lied on her application, her immigration application. And what happened was the party was so unapologetic they couldn't get away with saying, okay, we make an exception for her. So she was kicked out of the country, you could say. But yeah, it's a bit more nuanced, the story. But it was very, very almost like Schadenfreude. What goes around comes around. Yeah.
yeah. It sounds like
Well,
it.
I think that adds to what we have discussed before, and that is the dehumanization. That so on one hand, I think there is a sentiment in the Netherlands, especially in more right wing groups, that they don't like refugees. Okay, the hatred is there, the annoyance, but the even those who are, let's say, welcoming refugees, I think that we share something all together, and that is that we don't see people as humans. So we discuss about refugees, this and that. And another thing is that there is something expected. So we need refugees to act in a certain way, like Ayaan Hirsi Ali did. So people, and that's another aspect. I think one, of course, we have to discuss the root of why are people coming from countries that are subjected to violent wars. Why are they coming to here? That's one thing. But then oftentimes many of the people also, like in the past with the Indonesian groups that were coming to the Netherlands, are oftentimes also linked to certain or pro-Western, or at least they played a political role. So it is not a coincidence that who comes to this country. And yeah, here we have. I live in Zeeland. I have seen a lot of Ukrainian people coming in, but whether we like it or not, but that's not a discussion. But I think sometimes if we would talk about politics, it could very well be that they don't like what I say, and that we will have they will be perhaps pro Dutch and pro NATO and everything. And
We see that currently with Iran. I mean, with the
yeah,
Pahlavi, with the MAC organization, we see this. This is also not. This is not new.
Can,
We
can
yeah,
you
and
can
then
you,
the
can you
discussion
expand
is
on that?
about
What do you
You
mean?
have, you have the MEK in the Netherlands also.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes. So what happened there with the Iran situation? How is that in the Netherlands? Can you expand on that a little
In the
bit?
Netherlands, we see also, of course, people, let's say, who are protesting against the war, and you see Iranian people who are just are pro-war, who said, "Okay, let's bomb our country because we need to get rid of the regime." And I don't know exactly how these MAK people are working, but we see, let's say, they are on the surface, these different groups. So that's
I
not
know that
something.
about the MEK, that I spoke to Iranians here in the Netherlands, so the Iranians who were not these colonized minds, but they were harassed and attacked. They had to flee their homes because but I think that was more the Pahlavi groups. And then an
Yeah.
MEK person infiltrated in one of the sort of WhatsApp groups that we had. And she was they had to move her out of that group, but it's very active. And I think the chance that you will meet or an Iranian that will actually speak anti-imperialist is the chance is small, but luckily they are there. And I'm also involved in a group that is just set up here, the Global Solidarity Coalition. And they also try to unite with, for example, Cuban and Venezuelan people here who are anti-imperialist. So yeah, to be fair, these are hopeful initiatives, but they're so small, and yeah, most people don't understand them because they will fall. They know only the propaganda story about Iran, and only they know the propaganda about Venezuela and Maduro and Cuba and everything.
So clearly, the media system is not as much better or less bad than the U.S. media system as it may have been in the 90s and 2000s. It seems like European media systems have converged upon the shitty commercialized U.S. standard, which is very depressing to hear, and means that we need to educate people all the more. Actually, I've unfortunately got to get going, but I wanted to thank you guys for being so generous with your time. And if I could just ask quick question, just in case there are people from the Netherlands watching, which organizations would you recommend them join or volunteer with their time or money, or political parties, whatever you think you'd like to spread knowledge of?
I would say, and maybe this sounds very corny, but I would say Media Mondo for sure.
Thank you.
For sure,
Yeah,
because
we
I think
really
Marjolein is critical, very critical on all these topics that we discussed.
and it's I'm very open to writers or people who want to contribute. Of course, I will make a selection, but if you're interested to write, please contact me. Also, I already mentioned the Global Solidarity Coalition. They are on Instagram. Please follow them. They are also organizing protests, also in Belgium. And another group that I would recommend is about Cuba. So there is a solidarity for Cuba. You can also find them on Instagram, among others. And they are also collecting. They're organizing. They're doing fundraisers and organizing events. Yeah. So
Excellent. I will definitely link to Media Mondo for people. So I'll put that down in the description. We are gonna meet again. That's for sure. And I'm also thinking about maybe we can also do a one-on-one sometimes. I want to talk to you, Marjolein, about your work on geopolitics and the Dutch role. I think you do a lot of good stuff on that. Also Media Mondo, which, like I said, also English language, so people can definitely read that. And with Danny, I also want to do a face-to-face, and I want to go deeper into that Indonesian colonial mentality that we are often getting back to. I think that would also be a very interesting conversation. So please watch your inbox. We will definitely bother you again.
No, you're not bothering
But,
at all.
thank you so much, guys, for coming.
Thank
This was
you.
excellent again, and hope
Thank
to
you,
see you soon again.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Kareem. Marjolein, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Static crackles, voices rise. Truth breaks through their velvet lies. A screen of fire, a shield of steel. Bedbeat media makes you feel no borders, no change, no silence.